I'm Joe Butt from San Gervasi. This is the Rorschach, Georgia update from the 31st of October, 2024. Quick summary of what's going down in Georgia. Parliamentary elections took place on Saturday the 26th. The hoped Georgian dream, or Otzneba, would end its 12-year rule in government did not happen. Otzneba has said that they wanted a constitutional majority, but that was just to give the people something when they saw that they lost. So Otzneba cannot yet amend the constitution. They decided to give themselves 55% of the vote. All four major opposition parties underperformed, but managed to overcome the 5% entry barrier. The Coalition for Change, Kwarami Amelia Girchi Droa, or Tbilisi Plebiscite, received 11% of the vote. United National Movement, or Natsebi, garnered 10%. Coalition Strong Georgia, or Dzlieri, that also includes Lelo, achieved almost 9%, and Gacharia for Georgia, or Sakart Velostvis, fell just under 8%. No other party managed to cross the 5% threshold and receive a parliamentary mandate. So, Iago gave his predictable 3.5% to Otzneba. Thanks, Iago. According to the results published by the election administration, Otzneba won the election primarily due to the high percentage of votes it received outside of the big cities, where people are more dependent on local administration's government money and are more easily pressured than in Tbilisi. Some cases, Otzneba got over 80% of the votes in villages. In Tbilisi, Otzneba had its worst results. This outcome was unusual for Georgia, as typically the party that wins Tbilisi wins the overall election. Otzneba also lost significantly among Georgian citizens outside of Georgia, receiving around 15% of the votes from those voting outside of the country. Voter turnout reached its highest level since 2012, with over 2 million people casting their votes. Unfortunately for the people, the number of votes for Otzneba was also the highest since 2012. Day after the election, all four opposition parties and Salome Zurabashvili, Georgia's president, declared the elections illegitimate. They said that there were instances of outright election fraud, bribery, threats, and duress both before and during the election process, saying the results were unrepresentative of the will of the Georgian people. They called on their voters to attend a rally the following day to demonstrate that their voices had been stolen. Their call resonated, and despite clear demoralization among opposition voters, tens of thousands of Georgians showed up on Rustaveli Avenue. In their speeches to the crowd, the political parties promised to boycott parliament and refused the mandate granted to them in the elections. In her speech, Zurabashvili stated that recognizing these elections would amount to acknowledging a Russian takeover of the country. On Wednesday, the 30th, the prosecutor's office summoned the president to question her election fraud claims. The president publicly refused the summons and demanded the prosecutor's office stop playing ridiculous political games and concentrate on gathering evidence. The rally held on Monday, the 28th, coincided with the visit of Vladimir Putin's button polisher and European Union lackey, Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban, to Tbilisi. He was the first to congratulate Otzneba on its victory. Orban remains the only leader of an EU country allied with the Georgian ruling party. A video circulated on social media showing him coming out of a hotel and encountering Georgians headed to the opposition rally set on the same street. He faced boos and disapproving shouts before quickly leaving the scene. Other foreign politicians who recognized the elections were Nicolas Maduro, the president of Venezuela, who remains in power despite badly losing an election himself that he pretends he won, and he congratulated Otzneba. Venezuela is also one of the few countries that recognize the independence of Georgia's two separatist regions, Abkhazia and South Ossetia. Armenia, Azerbaijan, and Turkey soon followed in their congratulations to the government. On a more global scale, China gave support to the legitimacy of the elections. Russian state propagandist Margarita Simonyan and Alexander Dugin were also quick to congratulate Otzneba. Western reaction to the elections was extremely critical. On Sunday, the 27th, Charles Michel, the president of the European Council, called for an investigation into all the alleged cases of election fraud and stated that the Georgia's elections will be discussed during the informal meeting of the European Council in November. He also mentioned that the Council would decide what steps to take next and how to proceed with its relationship with Georgia. We can guess. On the same day, a similar statement came from Josep Borrell, the High Representative of the Union for Foreign Affairs and Security Policy. In a joint statement with the European Commission, Borrell emphasized that the Georgian election administration must act swiftly, transparently, and independently to investigate all allegations of fraud and restore faith in the election process. According to the article shared by the Sweden Herald on Tuesday, the 29th, the Swedish government will stop any cooperation with the Georgia government. Sweden will also allocate 25 million krona, which is around $2.3 million, in support of Georgia's civil society. These steps will be taken as an answer to alleged election fraud and attacks on civil society. Speaking of election fraud, on Monday the 28th, the local election observer mission My Vote for EU said that it uncovered an election fraud scheme and had over 370 photos and video evidence proving that. According to them, fraudulent voters showed up at polling stations with a piece of paper in their passport with ID numbers of other people. The registrars, who were their accomplices, entered ID numbers into their system manually, so these people could vote several times depending on the number of ID numbers they had. Schemes became possible because the registrars were not randomly selected, and the marking procedure that is supposed to safeguard elections from people voting several times was not universally applied. Also, before the elections, there were allegations circulating in the media saying that Otsneba's party activists were either paying people in regions for their IDs or threatening them to get one. This might be the way fraudsters were able to get ID information of people who did not show up to vote. Next up, on Thursday the 31st, the International Society for Fair Elections and Democracy, or ISFED, held a briefing. They stated that due to violations of fundamental electoral principles, the election results could not be recognized as a true reflection of the will of the Georgian people. With 1,000 observers stationed at polling places and additional 230 outside, they reported a total of 490 violations. Most of them involved attempts by individuals to vote multiple times, restrictions on the rights of observers, their expulsion from several polling stations, improper marking techniques, and breaches of anonymous voting procedures. On Tuesday the 29th, Gogi Gachari, a leader of Sakartvelostvist, demanded that the election administration make information available to everyone who voted, in which district and at what time they voted. According to him, this will make it clear whether the number of people who actually attended elections and the number of votes that were counted are the same. Since we mentioned the election administration, on Wednesday the 30th, they held a special briefing where its representatives talked about a stream of insults, threats, and bullying that had been directed against them after the elections. They shared screenshots of comments on their social media pages as evidence and said that any messages and calls they receive that break the law will be redirected to law enforcement authorities. That's the world's smallest violin playing Crimea River. Last week, we reported that Eto Buziashvili and Sopo Gelava, two researchers from the Atlantic Council, an American think tank in the field of international affairs, had their houses raided by financial police who confiscated their laptops and electronic devices. The only comment from the Ministry of Finance indicated that the case against the organization involved charges of fraud, money laundering, and tax evasion. This week, Sopo Gelava's husband, a member of the opposition Federalists, revealed that due to unknown reasons, Gelava and Buziashvili no longer have access to their bank accounts. Their accounts at Tbilisi Bank and Bank of Georgia are not officially frozen, but they cannot withdraw any money and have not been given any reason for this situation. After the news garnered widespread attention on social media, TBC Bank issued a brief statement saying that they are acting by the law, implying that their moves relate to the ongoing investigation. By the way, the Western analysis of these elections has been very slow and inept. The exception, by far the best and most insightful, is in Politico. It's called An Elegy for Georgia's Democracy by Michael Cicire, a professor at the Fell Institute at Penn in Philadelphia and Georgetown in D.C. He is so far the only one to mention what this whole election was about, a term and a method that must be understood to grok the global threat of fascism: political technology. No surprise, it's a Russian term. And, as if to make the point, finally a victory lap for the Kremlin and a sign of things to come, Alexander Malkovich, the well-known Kremlin political technology expert who has a $10 million bounty by the U.S. government for interference in U.S. elections, posted selfies in Tbilisi and was given a press pass by Georgia's Central Election Commission to be there for the elections. And that's it for this week. Thank you for joining us after such a dark week for Georgia. The history of the Samshoblo is long, and every generation has its challenge. Stay relentless, siblings. Knock bounties.